You'll get a little message. There you go. Okay, everybody happy? Anyway, I I wanted to just share a little bit, kind of a different twist on goal setting because there's so much pressure, I think, toward the end of the year while you're panicking about trying to finish the year. The world around us is trying to force us into thinking about next year and jumping as hard and fast as we can to build these big ginormous goals. And you have to there's so much pressure and so much stress at the end of the year when we talk about goals. And so we did kind of a goal setting thing. I don't know, maybe it was in September. We spent some time kind of talking about what our goals could be. But today I want to just kind of move it to a different level. And I want to talk about personal goals, not what your business is going to do, and not a focus on all that stress and pressure that comes from setting those goals. At the same time, it's exciting. I get that. But there is that kind of angst. And I feel like this is the season for a lot of pressure. And so I want to just kind of share a little bit today and see if we can't think on a different level. Because one of the things I do in my coaching with my coaching clients is not so much let's focus on what your business tracking is. If you need somebody to hold you accountable, to make sure you make the calls and make sure you know what to say and all of those things, that's a piece of it. That's not all of it. I think if you are a healthy human being and you have joy in your life, you are much more likely to accomplish those big, scary goals that we set out for. So it is about the swing of the pendulum for me. And if we can make that pendulum swing not so wide, but we have more of a narrow swing, we have a lot more, I guess, we are a lot closer to that work-life balance that people talk about. I think it's a myth. I don't think you have actual balance, but I think that you can walk a much more narrow path around it than you can these massive swings getting left and right. So anyway, I'm going to just jump, and I have finally figured out, thanks to my friends who were the early adapters this morning, who could jump on here and make sure I know how to share my screen. Usually I have it so you guys can all share yours, but it is not so easy for me to get to mine. So we're going to try that guy. All right, everybody see the orange screen in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that makes my heart feel so much better. Thank you. I want to kind of just talk about something crazy. If you, by the way, if you just have it set as the icon, if you move it to the main view, you'll have this on the big part of your screen because there's going to be a lot of little words that come up pretty soon. So you might want to see that bigger than just the icon thumbprint. So I want to talk about if everything stayed the same in your life, if every single thing was the same, you didn't have to focus on anything else, what one goal achieved would change your life. And when I first started thinking about this, I do a word every year, a new word every year, right? And make that the theme of my year. And so that has an impact for me on this stuff. But really, if I just say, okay, I don't want to set any goals, I don't want to have any big things that I have to, like all these different goals. Instead, I want to set one that if I could achieve that, so many other things would fall into place. And so I kind of want to start thinking a little bit about this. Now I have to figure out how to change. Oh, there we go. I can just scroll. Okay, so one of the things that I started thinking about was how much time do I have left? What's going on? Oh no, if I'm doing my screen, I can't let people in. No, boy, no. Okay, we have to just bounce back and forth between that and my sharing. This is going to be fun. I'm never doing this from the iPad again. I promise that. Okay, so the average American lifespan is 78 years old, and the average retirement age is 67 years old. So let's do the math. If it's 78 that we live to, and we average retirement age is 67, that means we have 11 years spent for this freedom that we work all these years for. And sorry, I hear more people bouncing in. This is not going well. Sorry, guys. So that means we have 11 years that we spend all of our work life for to enjoy. And so I'm like, gosh, 11 years goes by like that. It's, if you guys think back, and this is where I want you to be a little interactive. Think back, where were you 11 years ago and what were you doing? Like what was happening in your life 11 years ago?
I can answer that with didn't even have to think. 11
Good.
years
Give me a one sentence.
I was adjusting to life as a type 1 diabetic mother for the first time.
Yep. Yeah, that's a big one. What else? Who else was doing something 11 years ago?
Digging out of the financial crisis.
Yeah, that's true. And now when you guys look back, so that's a couple. Anybody else want to jump in? What else?
I was fighting with Kimberly Ryan's seller just to buy this house that I live in.
That's so true. Was it 11 years ago? See,
It's
this
actually,
is weird.
It's actually 12 this month.
It's 12. Yeah, exactly. So if you think about that, you guys, like how fast time has flown. So the financial crisis seems a long time ago, yet in some ways it feels like yesterday. Introducing Steve to my seller named Mr. Chatterjee, who wore a smoking robe all the time, bizarre and wild, seems like yesterday in so many ways. And Cindy, I imagine that it has been a very long road, but in some ways it seems so long ago, and in some ways it seems like yesterday.
Correct.
So 11 years of time goes by really fast. So all these things that we want to accomplish in this, like we're looking forward to retirement. We don't talk like that in our house. We don't actually talk about retirement because we don't see ourselves ever not working or ever not contributing or doing something. So we're just looking to freedom where we're not restricted by anything in terms of a job or responsibilities that way, but yet that we would choose those freedoms. The next thing that I kind of want to talk about is setting these personal goals. What are you going to do in those 11 years? Or how are the rest of your years before you hit that target age? And for whatever number that is for you, what are you going to do with your life in that time? I have recently had 3 sets of friends who have lost their mothers literally in the last 2 weeks. And it's been so interesting to have the conversations with them about things that they regret, things they wish they would have done more of, all of those things, right? So when we get to the end of our life and we have this whole litany of, gosh, I really wish I would have done this, I just never did it. And if I would have done it when I was 30, that would have been grand. If I would have done it when I was 50, that would have been grand. Maybe I'm at 60, and if I would have done it there, I still have some time, right? So I want to kind of talk about just setting personal goals to change your life. So how do we do this? What are they? What should they look like? And they should look like it should be a challenge. It should not be impossible. I'll give you an example. I have long said through the course of my entire life, after I became an adult, that I should have gone to med school. I looked at med school. When I had that realization, my kids were 1 and 2. And so I was like, okay, that's 4 years of this, 2 years of that, 2 years of that, 3 years of that, 2 years of that. Oh, I'll be like 40 when I graduate and have my my specialization, and my kids will have grown and been graduated from high school by that time. So I didn't do it because I didn't want to sacrifice my kids' childhood. I didn't feel like that's how I signed up as a parent. So then after 40 came, I was like, well, should I go to med school? Like they're kind of up and they're doing their own thing. Should I do this? And then it was never a strong enough passion for me to really want to commit to it. It was extraordinarily challenging, but it was truly impossible for all the other things that we were doing. And I did not want it badly enough. And so when we look at setting personal goals, they should be challenging. They should be things, but they shouldn't be so astronomical that like you're never going to make it. And you're never going to make it because you can't actually commit to it. And so when I looked at like setting up personal goals, challenging goals, yes, goals that matter to me. And I want to talk about this part. There's a lot of people who say, oh my gosh, you should do this. Oh my gosh, you would be so great at that. You should do this, or you could never do that. We would never want you to do that, right? So things that matter to you, disregarding what other people have to say and how they are speaking into your life. These goals that we want to talk about should be things that actually matter to you, things that you really, really want to do. So I'll give you a personal goal of mine around the whole medical school thing. I did not go to medical school. I am therefore not a medical doctor. But that did not keep me from doing mammoth amounts of research and studying, and that became my hobby. So some of you know I call myself a neurolo hobbyist because I'm fascinated with the brain. And so I have probably the equivalent of several doctorates in time, effort, and energy when it comes to understanding the brain and how it works, and how I can take that practical knowledge and make it practical application. So that really mattered to me. It was something that I could commit to. And in committing to it, then it allowed me to continue to grow and to continue to enjoy that, and then work with that goal and the achievement thereof. So your goal, your personal goals should be goals that that are challenging to you, goals that matter to you, not to everybody else, but just to you, and goals that you can commit to. In other words, I couldn't commit to med school, so this was not a good goal for me to set because it was never going to work because I couldn't commit to it, right? So make sure that these things are things that you can commit to. And then I think the next thing is, are your goals in alignment with your personal values? And so if we start thinking about this, like, yes, that medical school goal was very much in line with my personal values. I spend a lot of time studying. I know a lot of stuff about a lot of things. I have good conversations with my naturopath all the time, who, she's brilliant, and I love to pick her brain and learn from her. So yes, is it in alignment with my personal values? Health mattered to me, the way our body is created and what it can do for us. And those are things that were very much in line for me, right? So when we look at what is a personal value, these are easy statements that we just hear in our vernacular a lot. But I think to really understand, personal values are your personal beliefs, things you believe in, things you ascribe to, the way you live, the way you think, the way you talk, the places you go. Those are reflective of your personal values. And so I'm going to give you a little list. And this is by all means not a comprehensive list, but I just kind of went through and I was like, okay, what things are valuable to us? Like, what do we look at? And maybe this list, you can find 2 or 3 things that are really important to you. Authenticity is really, really important to me. It will always be the top word on the list for me. And so you'll see that. So I'll give you another personal example. This is me telling you my whole life story today, apparently. But I am not a massive fan of social media. But what I'm doing in my job, my career, my goals around the company Real is to be able to build relationships with people, meet more people, and connect. I can do that in a bigger way if I have a social media presence. Well, you see the good, the bad, the ugly, the dumb, the weird, the silly, because I do not want, when we meet in person, for you to be completely surprised by, oh, that's not who I thought you were. And so authenticity is a really big personal value for me. So my personal goals, the things that I'm going to do, are going to be in alignment with authenticity. Another one of my personal values is freedom. I like the freedom. I don't want to work a 9-to-5 job. I don't want to answer to anybody. I've done that kind of stuff before. I've built some really great things. I've had some great experiences, but I don't want that. I like the freedom of being able to say, I run my own schedule. I can build my life around that. That's a really big personal value for me. So I'm going to stop talking for a second because I want to hear from you guys. Like, what are your personal values? And pick out, and if you have something that's not on this list, feel free to shout that out too, because this is not, like I said, comprehensive. But like, what is a personal value to you and why? Like, how does it show it for you? Come on, I know you people have values. You could do it.
There's
I think I'll go ahead, Cindy.
No, I was just saying, there's just so many. Don't know what to pick.
All right, pick one. There we go. Steve, you hit it.
Well, I think one of the things that's just not on here for me is just genuine relationships, right? So when I connect with somebody, is it genuine versus it being just surface level, right? Because I think the deeper your relationships are, the better your business is, the further you go with deeper relationships. And I think that my relationship with you, Kim, over the years has been very deep and very wide with a lot of different things and a lot of varieties, but it's also brought us to where we're at here. Same thing with Todd, same thing with a lot of people on this call, right? There's a depth in the relationship. And it doesn't mean that you're on with them all the time, right? Kim and I can pick up where we left off the last time. Same thing I have with Todd, just with any one of you, right? But those relationships are deep and they're valuable when it comes down to it. And I think that's part of life, is just having valuable, deep relationships with people.
One of my mantras in life is that people are not disposable, right? So I do think people are seasonal. I think there's a difference. I think there's times in our lives where, we're really connected to somebody, and that is beneficial to both parties. And then there's sometimes that fades out. It doesn't mean the relationship is diminished. It just means the amount of input necessarily isn't the same. But it doesn't mean you toss people away. I think even when you're hurt by people or you have hurt people, I think there's value in pushing through that and restoring those relationships. There's wisdom in not keeping them really close if it's a trust issue, right? But I don't think it's wise to just toss people aside in those relationships, because there's so much that we learn in our lives with each other, by each other. And so, yeah, I think that deep relationship thing is that's a high one for me too. Thanks. Anybody else have a personal value you want to share?
I would say mine is, I have a few, would be loyalty is one of them.
So how does that show up in your world?
I've always been loyal to like my title company or my, my lender, but I guess it's frustrating when the loyalty isn't returned. I think that's where I struggle with at times, especially like with clients, and you like bend over backwards for them, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't get reciprocated. But I'm big about loyalty and then community and friendships. So I'm kind of right in line with Steve in the relationships. I'm a big relationships person.
It's so cool when I think about that too, because there's so much of our lives that is in community or in connectivity with people in relationships. And it's weird. I'm starting to feel like, I don't know, some old lady, but the older I get, the more value I have in the right relationships, right? How you're investing in people. And that comes across in like what we do and what we think. So when you look at this, like, how do you guys incorporate this into building personal goals, right? So when we're looking at this, these are our values. So the things that we're doing, if I go backwards a slide or two, remember, setting these are things that matter to you and goals that you can commit to. And so when we're looking at that, we need to make sure that they're staying in alignment with our belief system, or we're not actually going to commit to them. What we'll say and what we'll do may be very different things. And so that's why, like, when you're looking at setting a personal goal, and we'll go back to the very, very, very first thing that we talked about, right? So if everything stayed the same, what one goal achieved would change your life. It's going to have to be somewhere in alignment with these personal values, right? So I put a list together of just random things, right? That when we're looking at what our personal goal should be. And the tip in here is something that just matters. I mean, it really, really matters to you. So we've talked about these values. So we're looking at the value element. Those things need to play out in when we're determining what these personal goals are. And so, go on a trip with your best friends, lose 10 pounds, eat less sugar and junk food. I don't know if you can see my life in here. Get a degree in a subject that matters to you, read one new book per week, learn how to bake. That is not my goal. This is things for you. Get into graduate school, help someone else reach one of their dreams, write a book, go to Switzerland. You can read them yourselves, right? Saving for retirement, saving for an investment, building the career that you love. By the way, if this isn't the career you love, don't do it. Don't mess your whole life up just slugging things out because you feel obligated. Find something that you really love to do. One of the things that I added to this list was forgive someone who has hurt you. And, Lisa, you just mentioned that in a way, like we give and we give and we give, and sometimes it's not reciprocated. And that offends us or it hurts our feelings, or we get wounded by those things, and we're the ones who carry that stuff around. I learned something really valuable this probably about a month ago. I heard somebody talk about it. It was in a sermon that I was listening to online, and regardless of what your religious beliefs are, you can take the principle of this, I think. And it was like, he was talking about, we talk about forgiving ourselves, and we weren't really created or equipped to forgive ourselves of things. Really, what we have to do is accept things that happen and then forgive other people. And that's where we get freedom. So if you are stuck because people have hurt you and you're carrying around some open wounds, accept that, okay, it happened, but then extend that forgiveness to them, because that's the part where you get the freedom. And that's just a little mini sermon for you. But I'll go back here. There we go. Anyway, so these are some of the personal goals. Here's how do we do it? So I want to give you a practical way to walk this out. Create bite-sized goals. So look at the big picture. This is something that I want to do. And then break it down and get into smaller bite-sized goals. Okay, there we go. Sorry, we got bodies popping in and out today. Create bite-sized goals and then build a plan and a timeline. So these are things that I want to do. This is the one thing we're talking about, one goal that would change your life. If everything else stayed the same and you could achieve this one goal to change your life, what would it be? And so for some of you, maybe if we go back to this list, maybe you've never been out of the country. Well, that could actually be very life-changing. What if you go to a place that you fall completely in love with and you end up coming home, packing up and moving there? That's pretty life-changing. Think about these things, right? So create a bite-sized goal, build the plan and the timeline, and then track your progress. So I know everybody talks about tracking your numbers, know your numbers in your real estate business, but you should also know your numbers, so to speak, track your progress for things that you're achieving and working on personally. And then if you realize that this goal that you have set is astronomical and it is one of those unattainable or unachievable, and this is not giving you permission to give up on something, but if legitimately, okay, this is a bigger thing than I thought it was going to be, then modify the goal. Maybe the goal isn't just for 2023. Maybe this is the bite-sized pieces through 2023, because timing wise and whatever else is involved, maybe you don't have the ability to achieve this goal in 2023, but maybe if you put together bite-sized goals in 2023, you could get there in 2024. So modify the goal to a realistic place. Make sure though, if we go back to this little part that we talked about, keeping it challenging, right? It still has to be a challenge. If you can just accomplish it over the weekend, that's not a goal. That was a weekend goal, but that's not a life-changing goal in most places. Okay. So when you're looking at these, look at being able to modify the goal and ultimately make it fun. You have to enjoy this. Nobody is going to achieve something that they cannot see the joy in the journey or the joy at the end. And if the joy at the end is enough to sustain you on the journey, that's great. But if it's not, like most of humanity, then you need to make the journey fun. So find a way, a creative way that keeps you motivated and inspired and engaged to want to do it. And if we look back a little bit at this list, and obviously this is not a comprehensive list either, but if you look at this, okay, go for a walk every day. Well, there's a lot to be said for being able to look back on your app on your phone that says, oh my gosh, I've walked 12 days in a row. I'm going to keep going, right? Like there's good motivation for you. There's good ways for you to be connected to your goals. There we go. And then that will help you then stay excited and make it fun. Here's the last piece of what I'm going to talk about today. And that is eliminate the fear of it not going exactly as you planned. We have a paralysis by analysis for a lot of people. And so we don't make a personal goal, or we don't make a business goal, or we don't make a move, or we don't, like selling our house. I'm sure some of you went through this in this last market cycle of, oh my gosh, I have so much equity. Maybe now's the time I can finally get out and get what I want. Maybe I'm going to take that cash and and, you know, move it into investment opportunities, whatever. But maybe you didn't because you're like, oh gosh, what happens if the market changes? Well, good news, the market changed. The market will always change. But instead of being restricted by the fear and not going ahead, get right up front, go, listen, I don't know how this is going to walk out. The long-term goal is I want to get there, and I want to enjoy the process, and I want to enjoy the plan, and I want to modify if I need to modify, but I got to understand that it is already not ever going to go exactly as I planned. That's just not how life works. But we have this block in our heads sometimes that when we create the picture at the beginning, we don't leave any room for modification or adjustment along the way for the end goal. And so if we see that it's not going exactly as planned, well, then it's a total failure. So we can just stop. And that's the thing that I really want to drive home today for you and your mindset is that it is, you have to just say, listen, we're going to roll with it. Even when you are a very technical engineering type mind who doesn't allow for error or omission, you got to give yourself some mercy, because you're never going to be able to really enjoy this journey here if you don't just keep going. And it is okay to try and try and try and try again. I really want to make sure you hear that part of it, because we don't know what we don't know until we get down the road. Excuse me 1 second. We don't know what we don't know until we get down the road. And when we get down the road, let me do this. There we go. When we get down the road, then we have this ability to look backwards. And you hear that hindsight is 2020, right? We can all see things so much clearer. Oh, if I would have known that, I could have done it this way. If I would have known that, I could have done it that way. But you know what? You would not have learned the lessons that you learned in that journey if you would have known then what you know now. And sometimes that means we have regret, and sometimes we have disappointment, and we have frustration. And I would just challenge you to say that iron sharpens iron, right? So we go through these, the fire. If you look at gold and the refining process of gold, gold doesn't come out of the earth looking shiny and beautiful and formed to hold, you know, a priceless gem. It comes out of the earth kind of ugly, kind of jaggedy. It's got other minerals and other junk in it, impurities, so to speak. But it isn't until it goes into the fire and the heat gets turned up that all of those impurities start to rise up and get skimmed off. And then the gold ends up in its most pure form. That is really what it looks like to go on a journey of building your goals and your achievements and trying to figure out what you want to do in your life. You have to go through some of that friction. You have to go through some of that heat in order to really get to a place where you have achieved the solid gold, the pure gold. And by the way, no, everybody usually stops that analogy at that point. Do you understand that when you get to pure gold, it's really soft, it's malleable, it gets dented, it gets scarred, and it gets marred? So there is no actual like arrival. We keep going and we keep growing and we keep going through friction and fire to get what we need. But if we look at what our personal values connected to what our personal growth and goals need to be, don't be mistaken to think that those are going to come, the achievement of those goals is going to come without being tested and without having to prove yourself through them. And just because it's hard doesn't mean it's a goal that you need to shift and modify out of, because you go, this is unattainable because it's hard. Well, is it unattainable or is it hard? Because those are not the same things. And sometimes we land in the thinking camp of, because it's hard, it's too hard, and we can't get there. And so I just want to really encourage you guys as you kind of walk into 2023 and we finish out 2022 to take some time to reflect and look back, because we want to see the things we have achieved and the things we've learned. And by the way, sometimes the things we learn it doesn't feel good. I've learned a lot of hard lessons over the last 5 years, some really hard things that shaped me to today and give me a different level of wisdom and a different level of insight as I go forward. So looking back is good. It's not all warm and fuzzy sometimes, but it's definitely good for us. And, you know, if you think about it in that fashion, that you're getting shaped and you're getting fashioned and you're getting formed into the next best version of yourself so that you are this person who can operate from wisdom and you can make contributions to people's lives, the people in your family, your friends, yourself, that you can now show up in a better way. You can show up in a way that encourages other people to grow and inspires them. So just because it's hard doesn't mean it's unattainable. And it's okay to try and try and try and try and try again. I know there's a lot of people who eliminate the term try because, you know, Tony Robbins talks a lot about, you know, you don't try, you just do. And I'm like, that's great, but there is effort and energy put forward in your strife to get somewhere. And I think, you know, nobody gets to the top of the mountain by standing at the bottom of it. You got to work and make it happen. So I just hope that this little personal goal vignette that we did today is not super heavy, but be more inspiring to you, to encourage you to look at some goals about you and not just your business and not just the things that we spend all this time in the business world talking about, but literally let's just take care of you. Do something that you really want to do. And if it incorporates your business, that's terrific. But I'll bet you, and maybe we'll have this conversation again next year at this time, but I'll bet you if you commit to this and you do this, that your business will improve, your relationships with people will improve, your outlook on life will improve. When you're doing something that's beneficial to you and it's in alignment with your values, then you actually are setting yourself to flourish and be wildly successful. So that's it for me today, you guys. Anything from all of you that you want to share or you think about, or just have any kind of impact in what you're already thinking?
Hey,
Can I
can I
add
throw in a
something?
good recommendation? Oh, go ahead, Steve.
No, you first, Todd.
Well, just a quick recommendation. If anyone wants to kind of dig in on it, there's a great book out there called Living Forward by Daniel Harkavy, who's a good friend of mine, and Michael Hyatt, where it really walks you through how to write a life plan so that you know, most people do spend time on a business plan, but, you know, their analogy in there, I don't remember the exact days, but it's like, you know, the average person spends like, you know, 3 full weeks of, you know, 24 hours a day, you know, planning out a wedding. You know, you might spend like, you know, 5 full days, 24 hours a day spending out on planning a vacation, and you know, in a couple of days buying a car, but no one actually ever spends time to really be intentional, kind of like what you're talking about with your life. So that's a great book. And if anyone wants, I did a webinar on it, I think sometime, probably this time last year. So if anyone's interested, I could send you the link, and it kind of walks through how to set up a life plan.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Thank you. Anybody else?
Am I the only one that is thinking, how can you pick? You talk about, you know, don't just pick for your, you know, your career, your job, your work, but pick for you. There are so many aspects in our lives. How do you pick just one? That I don't know why, and I'm probably the only person here, why that overwhelms. Just picking.
You're not the only person here. I mean, not that you're not the only person here. You're not the only person here. It feels like that because, you know, I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, we look at all of these places and avenues of where we could improve, or we have a bounty of dreams, hopes, and wishes. And so trying to like sift through them. Well, I want to be a hot air balloon pilot and I want to, you know, drive an Indy car and you know, whatever. I think it's more, those are great personal goals of things that you want to achieve. But I think for me, I don't talk about success as much anymore. I talk more about satisfaction, because success, I think, is fleeting and it's subjective, right? So success to me might mean X, Y, and Z, but to you, success might mean A, B, and C, right? So when we talk about success and people go, oh, we want to be successful. Okay, well, what does that mean? And I have broken it down to, I think instead of the word or the term success is something that's going to give you a deep soul satisfaction level, like something where you're like, that is meaningful to me. That's really, I want to do this. And if it's something, Cindy, you're a giver. And so that's part of why this is hard for you, because I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that. And for many of us who are givers, that it is hard to sift through and narrow it down to one. But where do you want to give? Where do you think that your impact will be the highest or the strongest? Because that's likely to give you the deepest level of satisfaction. So when you can narrow those things down, so, being a hot air balloon pilot, okay, that'll be fun, but it's probably not going to give me this deep level of, satisfaction, unless that just becomes my whole life dream, right? So, but I think it's really about, where are you going to find that? What is going to feed your soul to a level where you haven't experienced that kind of satisfaction before? And it doesn't have to be, she's a giver, and I know this about her. So I know that that's part of why this is crippling. Well, because I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this. But really just take the time to like walk it out, think about it, let it settle in. And really you will be able to narrow it down to like, I really, really want to do that. And when you figure out what that is and you set that goal and that intention, that's going to give you a different level of satisfaction right at this beginning. But as you're walking it out, that is also going to be what perpetuates you to keep going, because you're in search of that satisfaction, because you know the impact of that contribution is significant and you want to be a part of it. It comes from this desperate place, right? So what are things that things I really, really, really want to do? I accomplished a lot of my personal goals this last year because I was very intentional in 2020 and in 2021 about things that I needed to get clear in my head. And 2022 was a year of just picking those things off left and right. And honestly, I'll be really transparent. It gave me an absence of what to do for 2023 because I was so aggressive in picking off so much of that in 2022 that I've had to spend some time to go, okay, now I need to get in realignment with what's next, right? And so don't worry about what's next in this one, get this one, and then we'll get to the next one. But I don't think you're the only person who's challenged by that. I think you should be encouraged by that. You're welcome.
I can add a few things, Kim.
Go.
One of the things that was a great book, and they've got great worksheets. It's a book called The 12-Week Year by Brian Moran.
Okay.
And, it's such a great book because what it really does is you take a year's worth of goals, but you cut it down into 12 weeks, right? If you want to sell 100 houses, you break it down into quarters rather than focusing on the 100 houses, right? So we bring it all back. And, he's really, really focused on, giving yourself time to dream and cut it down for that 12 weeks and then giving yourself a break. So what happens is the 12 weeks doesn't end, first, second, third, fourth quarter because of the way it's broke down, because there's a week before and a week after. So it's more like 14 weeks. So it kind of moves through and it breaks up the year differently than what we normally break things down as. But it's really good from that standpoint. And I really, even a strategy session I had this week, right? It's 90-day sprints. And I think what's important for that, as we all experience COVID and some of the market shifts, is that when you're doing things and planning at 90 days at a time, it gives you the ability to reset based on what the market is doing, because it's not always the same, right? And so it gives you the ability to pivot rather than, okay, we had all these business plans for this year and now it screws up and we've got to change and shift, versus if we have those plans for 90 days, the goal's still the same, but you might have to shift or pivot during that 90 days once comes the end of it. The other thing, Kim, you talked about the walks, right? If you're going to take a walk every day, there's kind of a fun app called Streaks, where, it kind of gives you the reminder. You can set whatever streaks you want, whether it's working out or your water or whatnot. And so you're kind of gives you a reminder every day, did you hit your streak? So it shows you how many days in a row you kind of went through. And then the last thing too, Cindy, kind of what you're saying is that this is a big thing in our office when we're going through stuff is, we have to start with the end in mind. So what do you want the end to look like? And then you have to reverse engineer and go all the way back, right? Because we can get overwhelmed by writing down all these goals. But like what Kim says, what is your version of success? And it's got to be your version. We spend too much time on social media looking at everybody else's version of success. And we bounce around. And I've recently acquired the term SS, which is squirrel syndrome, right? So we watch somebody else on social media, like, oh, I really want to be that person. But the reality is we have to find it in us who we want to be and what our version of success is, and stop looking at what everybody else is doing, because we're constantly comparing rather than just staying focused on what you want and how you want to show up. and leaving it at that, right? Because everybody has a different version. It's kind of some of the stuff that I teach when we're going through the investment side, which is everybody's dream life budget is different, right?
Yep.
Todd may not want to have 12 cars like I do, so his dream life is different, right? And by the way, it's really good to see Todd on this call. Todd and I go way, way back, so glad you're here, Todd. So I do think it's one of those things where we all have to look at what our versions of success are and what we want, and then engineer it based on that rather than what everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
shut
good.
up now.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate it. Anybody else have anything to talk about in terms of your personal goals and how this can impact your thinking and what your plans look like?
I want 12 cars now.
There we go. Well, yeah, I mean, there you go. It's a new 2023 goal. Does Tara know this?
No, we'll need a bigger house, but I'll have to let her know that too.
Yeah, this is true. You don't need a bigger house. You just need a bigger garage. It's fine. You'll be fine. I love it. All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for coming to Lions and Legends today. I appreciate you. I look forward to doing nothing next week together, but January 2nd, I think is the first Monday. So I'll be here. I'll be looking for your lovely faces. I wish you a super happy holiday.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everybody.
See
Bye,
y'all.
you guys.